this is something that's extremely unclear. There may be UK businesses who feel that and who have been impacted by the Liberation Day tariffs, who will certainly feel that if refunds are given, that they should be entitled to a share of this. Trump has signaled that any refund process would be take quite a long time in the courts to go through. So the actual state of refunds is another area in which things are very, very uncertain at the moment.
Donald Trump has announced a reduced level of global tariffs after the Supreme Court ruled that his previous tariff policy was illegal. Speaking from the White House yesterday, a furious Trump vowed to find alternative ways to push through his initial tariffs. Here's a flavour of Trump's furious reaction to the ruling.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
So where does this leave Trump's key economic policy? Joining us to discuss this is Daniel Smith, economist at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Daniel, were you surprised by this Supreme Court ruling?
In some ways, no. The announcement using emergency powers was contested through a variety of courts, and it looked likely that the Supreme Court was going to strike it down.
Though it was quite as decisive. It was 6-3, and then two of the judges who voted against this were appointees of Donald Trump himself.
Yes. I'm more focused on the effects of these tariffs rather than some of the political standings of judges within the Supreme Court. Yeah. But yes.
Well, no. Okay, so Daniel, talk me through, where does this leave Trump? Because this was such a central plank of his whole policy, tariffs. If he has to, if he can no longer use them, what options does he have left?
Well, Trump is still going to pursue the use of tariffs, as we saw from the most recent announcement. While his grand Liberation Day 10% minimum tariffs announced on April 2nd were deemed illegal by the Supreme Court, he has announced an alternative act that has allowed him to implement for a maximum of 150 days a tariff of 10% globally, which essentially serves to replace this initial tariff announcement that he made in April that was deemed illegal by the Supreme Court.
Now, the 10%, of course, that was famously what the UK managed to negotiate. And in relative terms, the UK got themselves a very good deal, certainly a lot better than some other countries, and certainly a lot better than the EU. I'm just wondering, where does it leave us, the United Kingdom, with Donald Trump? Is our trade deal that we negotiated with him safe, do you think?
Well, this is in many ways the issue for many UK businesses, is that these announcements come so thick and fast, and there's so much uncertainty for all these businesses that are exporters to the US. Principally, these new tariffs are only guaranteed to be in play for 150 days. What this means is that contracts regarding shipping and imports to the United States that are often signed maybe long term, the tariff rate around them is unknown. It's not clear if that 10% is still going to be there at the second half of the year, or whether the rate will change. Businesses can't at the moment prepare and forward plan in the same way as they could before these announcements were made.
Yes. And do you think, one of the big things that the Supreme Court did not rule on is whether companies, individuals, or indeed whole countries could claw back some of this money. The tariffs in general have brought into the US Treasury, I think it's $175 billion, of which about $130 billion were from specifically the tariffs that have been deemed illegal. Do we any British exporters or indeed any US consumers? Will they see any of this money back in their pockets?
Well, again, this is something that's extremely unclear. There may be UK businesses who feel that and who have been impacted by the Liberation Day tariffs, who will certainly feel that if refunds are given, that they should be entitled to a share of this. Trump has signaled that any refund process would be take quite a long time in the courts to go through. So the actual state of refunds is another area in which things are very, very uncertain at the moment.
To your knowledge, has there ever been a precedent of getting money back in a situation like this? Or do you indeed expect anyone to mount a challenge in order to try and get some money back? Because there were quite a few American companies who sort of set up pressure groups trying to tell US consumers that tariffs are going to hurt you, the US consumer.
Yes, well, I can't quite speak to precedents regarding tariff refunds or whether the ultimate result will be that refunds are given. Ultimately, the president is still pursuing a system of tariffs. So these impacts that you've seen on consumers will likely persist within the United States because these rates are still being pursued by the president.
And do you have a view? I mean, obviously, the specific thing that was outlawed by the Supreme Court is tariffs that were levied under the International Emergency. I forget. It's international. It's the EPA. What's that stand for? International Emergency Powers Act. Do you think that Trump will continue? I mean, he still loves. Essentially, are tariffs still his favorite word? Will he find other routes in order to use tariffs as both an economic and a political policy?
Well, he's certainly signaled that that's something that he would like to do. However, I'm afraid I can't quite speak to what the president's inner circle is feeling regarding tariffs. What it means ultimately, since the UK and UK exporters are so exposed to what happens within these inner circles and the decisions that are made and announced on such quick notice, is that this incredible uncertainty, this inability to forward plan, is highly likely to continue into the future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was Daniel Smith, economist at the Centre for Economics and Business Research.